Hey Emily, how's it going?
Are you?
Good, thanks. I'm just going to make my screen shareable. I see my note taker is here,
Yep.
so we
Right on
can right on time, right on time.
time.
Great. And Laura's here. Awesome. It's really cold here.
The,
Yeah,
do you have a bunch of snow too?
no snow, just really
Oh,
chilly.
yeah.
We
Frigid,
haven't
huh?
we haven't had real winter in a really long time.
I know. I was thinking that. Yeah, my parents are in Michigan getting, I think, probably a lot of snow.
Lots of snow.
Yeah.
Before we begin, do you um, I just have you on speaker for Zoom. Is there a setting that you think is better for? No, it's okay.
I don't think so. I
Okay.
think that
Okay,
works.
perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we have 3 minutes. It's a long time.
Oh, so much time.
No intro music.
I always feel so awkward when people play intro
Yeah.
music on Zoom. I'm always like,
Oh yeah, that
what
is,
am I
yeah.
supposed to do?
It's like being in the elevator.
Yeah, totally. Hilarious.
So I know that a lot of people, I think because of the season, like they couldn't come live, but a lot
Oh,
of
okay,
people
sure.
wanted to get the
Mhm.
recording. So we'll see. Well, Laura's
Great.
here. That's good.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um,
that's great.
I also
We'll get
think
a few more.
Lauren is coming live, and a bunch of people
Cool.
wanted to watch the recording. So if you're watching
Cool.
on the recording, hello.
Yeah.
We'll
I
say
guess we're
hello to
talking
you
to you.
again
Hi.
in a second. Yeah, we get
Yeah.
going.
Banter, banter. Yeah.
Exactly. I go to this coffee shop in the morning to work, and it's really cold. Like the whole front of the building is just like a metal wall. It's like metal on the
Oh,
bottom and glass on the top.
yeah.
So it's just freezing in there. It's so
Yeah.
cold. You really
I
have to,
bet.
like, I bring a wool wrap. I have like long underwear on
Yeah.
and
Oh my gosh.
layers and a wool wrap because also the table is metal. So like
Uh-huh.
everything is
Like
really
a
cold.
warehouse. Yeah,
You have to
yeah,
go
yeah.
fully equipped.
Yes. I could see that. Yeah. That is the hard thing about working outside the house in the winter. If the temperature's wrong. At home I have my space heater. I could, I could do get the blankets out or whatever I need, but in public it's a little bit harder.
Yeah,
Schlep all
exactly.
that stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Luckily, it's New York, so nobody thinks anything of it. They're like, okay,
No.
you know,
Whatever
you
you
could
whatever.
you could show up in a big bird costume and they'd be like, all right, okay, that's your look
Yeah.
today.
This is how I write. What? I
Exactly.
write best in a bird costume.
Nothing to see here.
That's right. Hilarious.
All right. Well, we're almost there. I'm just gonna check my
One more
email,
minute.
make sure everyone's got it into the right place. Let's see. Okay, looks good. Yep. Okay. Well, it is exactly 12 on the East Coast. So 9 a.m. Pacific and some other time zone where you are, other people. So, but let's get going since a lot of people are going to watch on recording. And yeah, we've been hanging out for a few minutes. Oh, here's Robert. Great. Hey, Robert. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to
Nice
see
to
you.
see you, Joelle.
Yeah, nice to see you too. Very nice. We're just saying we're going to dive right in, even though we're exactly at the hour.
Okay,
So
great.
you're you're right on time.
Oh, good. Okay, good, good.
Perfect. Okay. I realized that actually I just one more thing I want to do. Sorry, I should have got this lined up before. I just wanted to. Ah, okay. So, good morning, everybody, and hello, everybody watching on recording. We are so glad that you're here. We are talking today about hybrid publishing and when it's the right choice for you. And of course, bound up in that question is what are the publishing paths? And I thought it'd be really amazing to talk to my colleague, Emily Crookston, because she is not only a professional writer, ghostwriter, developmental editor, but she also has just gone through her own experience of working with a hybrid publisher and learned a lot along the way. So I thought, who better to come and talk to us about this experience than someone who is already writing for a living, developing books for a living, and then going through publishing? Because there's always lots to learn, and you don't know what you don't know until you realize you don't know it. So I'm going to introduce Emily, and then maybe Emily, you'll add something yourself to this, but I'm just going to read from her impressive bio, and then we'll jump right in.
Okay.
Yeah. So Emily Crookston is a best-selling business book ghostwriter, author, and developmental editor. She specializes in helping founders, experts, and business owners write a book that sells. As the owner of The Pocket PhD, she creates and implements content strategies for self-published business book authors who are ready to find their best angle, align their current content, and prime their audience for the book. Her first book, Unwritten: The Thought Leader's Guide to Not Overthinking Your Business Book, is out now through Amplify Book Publishing. Emily is a former philosophy professor, speaker, and podcast host. When she's not writing intensely, she's most likely practicing yoga intensely, and she lives for desserts topped with real whipped cream. I mean, who wouldn't want that?
Who doesn't?
Welcome, Emily. I'm so glad we can do this today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Joelle. I'm excited. So I've got some slides. I'll share my screen. We're gonna talk for a little bit. I'll present, and then we'll do a Q&A at the end. So probably best to save questions for the end. If you have something like a clarifying question and you want to raise your hand or pop something into the chat, hopefully I'll be able to watch the chat or Joelle will be able to prompt me and we can answer those questions. But otherwise, we'll do everything at the end with the Q&A. So here we go. Share my screen. There we go. All right. I see you all. Can you see my screen?
I can see it.
Are you good?
Yep, great.
Okay.
And I'll
Cool.
monitor the
Awesome.
chat. So if anyone has
Okay.
questions, I will be there in the chat.
Perfect. That sounds great. Right. So we're talking about when hybrid publishing is the right choice for you. We can preface this whole conversation by saying, as Joelle mentioned, I am a ghostwriter. I write primarily business books. So what I mean by that is a book that you're writing basically to market your business. And so a lot of what I say applies to business book authors in particular, but a lot of it, of course, is applicable to you, whether you're writing a fantasy novel, whether you're writing a memoir, right? It can apply, and I'm happy to answer questions about those different types of books that you might be writing. So some of this, just keep in mind, keep in the back of your mind that a lot of it applies particularly well to writing a business book, which is what I wrote. So how to publish your book is a really big decision. You've spent a lot of time writing your book and you want the publishing process to be as smooth as possible. You want it to feel right. You want it to make a lot of sense for you. So it's a big decision, and that's why we're here to chat about it. I'm glad you're joining me to listen to what I have to say about it. So as Joelle mentioned, there's some options, right? So there's, I think, basically three options these days. So there's traditional publishing, which includes an indie press. It can include indie presses. So traditional publishing, the idea is you query an agent, you tell them about your book, you have a book proposal, you send your book proposal to an agent who wants to read it, and then they shop that proposal around if they believe in the project. Then there's self-publishing, and by that I mean kind of on your own self-publishing. So basically, you're doing everything yourself. You format the book maybe, or you could pay someone else to format it as well. But you're taking it to probably Kindle Direct Publishing and uploading that book yourself, and then maybe you do print on demand for your book, or you do some kind of print run through Amazon. But you're basically responsible for doing all of the publishing logistics, handling all the publishing logistics. And then there's hybrid publishing, which kind of tries to marry the two of these options or give you kind of a middle point. It's basically self-publishing with support. But the hybrid publishing company that you go with will do things like format the book for you. They'll probably have some design elements, giving you, a cover designs to choose from. They have some editors who will help you as well. But it's basically having a team to help you self-publish your book. And with hybrid publishing, you pay upfront, so it's quite an investment. But we'll get into some of the pros and cons in a little bit. So I used a hybrid publisher. Joelle mentioned I used Amplify book group to publish my book. And I'll talk about my reasons for why I did that soon. But just to give you the lay of the land, these are kind of the options out there. To figure out what's best for you, you want to consider a few things. You want to consider your goals. So what is the book going to do for you? What's your book's why is one way I talk about it. Or, what's the job your book is going to do for you? Is it going to help you grow your business? Then the answers to, what the best publisher is will have to do with, the marketing piece. Who's going to help you make sure that your book is a successful marketing piece for you? If your goal is to impact the world or maybe become start a movement or something like that, then you might want to consider publishing your book in a different way. Other questions or other considerations, how other similar books were published. So if you're a fantasy book author, where do your favorite authors publish their books? How are their books published? You can even just look outside of your genre, but thinking about how other people have published and been successful is another good place to start, good questions to ask yourself. And then your author friends. Most writers have friends who also publish books. How are they doing it? And, the point of all of this questioning and looking around is not necessarily to, play the comparison game. Oh, so-and-so got a traditional publisher, so I need to get a traditional publisher. That's not the point, but you're really just exploring options and trying to figure out, again, what works for you. If your author friend had similar goals to what your goals are with your book, then you want to get very cozy with them and figure out, how they made it happen, how it worked for them. And what I found is people are so generous. You can always ask them how they did it. I've gone to plenty of authors, like friends of friends, and said, how did you do this? What worked for you? And I learned a lot in the process as I was researching how to publish my book. So we'll look at some pros and cons. So first, I want to talk about hybrid versus traditional. The main reason, or one of the big reasons to go with hybrid publishing over traditional is that hybrid is a lot faster. So traditional publishing can take years. You might query agents for a year. Then you might find an agent and they might shop your proposal around for a year. The publisher decides to pick it up. It's another couple of years before it's out in print. It can take a really long time to go through that process. So hybrid's faster. I started working with Amplify in October of 2023. My book launched, the official launch day was October 1st, 2024. So it took about a year. I did have the books printed. The books were printed in the warehouse in May. So there's kind of a long runway to make sure Amazon has all their ducks in a row, basically. It takes a few months for the book to be in stock and all of that stuff in Amazon. But my original book publishing date was supposed to be August. So, 9 months is even a very reasonable, or 10 months is a very reasonable time frame with a hybrid publisher. With hybrid, you often have a better royalty deal, and you get to you get to own the rights to your book. So with self-publishing, you own all the rights. There's obviously no publisher to negotiate those rights for the movie, for the option, or whatever those other things that can be in a book contract, obviously, if you're doing it yourself. But hybrid also ensures that you keep the rights to your book. So again, it's a self-publishing with support is the way to think of it. Hybrid royalties on books tend to be better than with traditional. So the royalties with hybrid is like 15 to 100%, anywhere in that range. With traditional publishing, it tends to be below 15% in terms of royalties. Makes sense because you're paying the hybrid publisher up front. So a big part of their business model is that authors are paying them and investing and getting them to help. So it makes sense that they would take less of the royalties after the book comes out. With traditional publishing, there's no upfront costs. You may get a book deal, you may get it in advance, right? That's one of the biggest pros to going the traditional route if it works for you. Then there's some pros and cons of hybrid versus self-publishing, doing it all on your own. With hybrid, you get better distribution options. Typically, this is the main reason I chose a hybrid publisher. I figured I don't have any relationships with my local bookstores. I don't have relationships with press and media. They do. They have a list of people that they can reach out to, and they can take care of making sure the book's in Amazon, and I don't have to worry about Amazon's system or understanding the algorithm or any of that stuff. The hybrid publisher takes care of that. With hybrid, you also have people you can ask for advice on various things. You can ask them, how should I price my book? Sure, I'm sure you can Google it or ask AI, what was the price that I should put on my book? But you're going to get a lot of mixed answers, and there's going to be a lot to wade through. So it's just sometimes nice, I think, to have the experts that you're going to and ask them what to do. Amazon also gives you pricing recommendations, but it's nice to have that the expertise to get the answer to your question and get the why, get to understand why they're saying what they're saying. Self-publishing, there's no doubt about it. It's the cheapest route. It's free to put your book up on Kindle Direct Publishing. You could create an ebook, create a PDF, put it on your website and sell it. Again, basically free. You do have to pay for your ISBN number when you're publishing a book on Amazon or through the normal distribution channels. But other than that, you could literally get away with just that. If you want to design your own cover and you want to format your own book, right? There's all the pieces that have to be done, but self-publishing is definitely a cheap route. In fact, you could do it really well, probably for around 15K. I think that's a very possible way to self-publish without doing, necessarily going through a hybrid route or whatever. But you could, pay someone for the cover, pay someone for the formatting, and maybe pay someone for some book marketing help, say, and do it very well for a lot less than what I'm paying for my hybrid publisher. So when to go hybrid? This is sort of my master list of generalities that I might share about when to go hybrid. If you want to get your book out quickly, again, hybrid is a really quick option. It's much faster than traditional. If you're writing a book primarily for marketing purposes, I think hybrid makes sense, especially if you don't want to learn the ins and outs of how to publish your own book. I always say, if you have a lot of questions and you don't really feel like you're going to be good at finding the answers, or you don't want to go through the headache of finding the answers, then using something like a hybrid publisher makes a lot of sense. They've done this a lot more than you have. They have some answers. Project management is not one of your strengths. Publishing a book is a business project. Whether you have a business or not, even if you're just an independent, freelance author or something like that, it's still a project that you need to figure out how to manage. You need to say, okay, if I want my book to launch on this date, reverse engineer what the marketing looks like, what the steps are to make sure the book's ready to go on that date or in stock on that date. That's something that you have to figure out. So if project management is not one of your strengths, like me, then possibly working with a publisher makes more sense. And then if you have more money than time, it's not cheap to go hybrid. I'm about $40,000 into the hybrid. That's the investment that I've put in with my hybrid publisher. 15K of that or so is the marketing package, which is an option that I added on. So I'm that should give you an idea of what the cost is. It's not cheap, and that's why I usually recommend it for the book is for marketing purpose. That's how you're going to get the money back that you've paid the hybrid publisher, through marketing, definitely not through book sales in most cases when you're writing a business book. So when to go traditional, here are some sort of this is some general advice about what I'd say about that. If you're writing a book primarily to make an impact, so it's not a business book, it's not really for marketing, then I would say traditional route makes sense, at least as a starting point. And there's no sense, there's no reason not to try to go traditional in that case, because then, if you're not writing a book where you're going to make your money back through growing your business or through the marketing side of things, then it makes sense to try to cut down on the cost. And traditional publishing does have some cost saving benefits to it. If you could honestly see your book being turned into a movie, or you honestly think that it's a bestseller, traditional is definitely the way to go. If you already have collected a large audience ready to go, people who are ready to receive your book, and by large I mean 25,000 or more, then it may make sense to go traditional. If you talk to a traditional publisher, a lot of them are, wanting to know how you're going to become a bestseller. That's kind of, with at least with the big five, that's a big question and looming in their brains. So that means selling at least 25,000 copies. So you've got to have a large audience to be able to, prove to them that you can do that. So that's kind of where I'm getting the 25K number. And again, that's going to assume that every one of those people in your audience buys your book, which won't happen either. But just the size of the audience is another consideration. If you've already published a book with a traditional press and had a good experience, then there's no reason probably not to go that direction again. So these are some considerations to think about if you're weighing the options, weighing what to do. A little bit of other advice. Again, ask people who've been through the process to share their experiences. Go to a literal bookstore and hold some books in your hands. This will give you an idea of what feel you want for your book, because as soon as you pick a publisher, some questions start coming at you, like what kind of cover do you want, and what size book do you want? You start getting these questions, and if you haven't sort of done some thinking about that, if you don't already have an idea of what books on your shelf you like to hold, and what you want your book to feel like and look like, it can be helpful to do a little research by going to the bookstore. And you can also look at how did this book get published, and you can take a bunch of notes and you can start making a list. You want to steer clear of vanity publishers. It's not always easy to tell who's a vanity publisher and who's a hybrid publisher. But some of the things to look for are, do they have any criteria for choosing books? Is it possible for anyone to publish with this publisher? So they have no vetting process whatsoever, then that's more than likely a vanity publisher. So even the hybrid publishers will, ask for a book. Some of them ask me for a book proposal. Others just want to hear about the book, and then they'll at least, get on the phone and talk you through whether this is a good fit. So looking for that, looking for what are the services that they're offering you for the price that they're charging. Some vanity publishers are really just charging you for uploading your book to Kindle, which again you can do yourself. So if you're just paying to have your book uploaded or just uploaded and printed even, that might be a vanity publisher. So just kind of, give it the smell test. If it sounds too good to be true, once you start poking into it, you start to get some red flags, then you have a feeling that, this is probably a vanity publisher. And you can, of course, again, ask around, ask if people know about the publisher. So just some key questions here for potential publishers. If you get on the phone with a publisher, what kinds of questions do you want to be asking them? And I do recommend sort of shopping around. I think I talked to 3 or 4 different publishers before I decided who to go with. And some of the questions to ask are these. What's the editing process like? So how involved are you going to be at the editing side of things? Do they do line edits? Do they do developmental editing? What's the level of editing? Does it go through a couple of rounds of editing? Just what the process looks like. What similar books have they published? Books that are similar to yours, and what ones in particular have been successful? And importantly, what does success mean? What do they count as success? They'll probably ask you the same question. And so you want to kind of think that through as well, but that's always hard. I find that question very hard in the beginning. What does success look like? What's reasonable? I have no idea. So it's helpful to talk with an expert about that and hearing from them, well, books like yours have sold this many with us, and, those kinds of things. And we've done these kinds of marketing efforts to get this result. Those are always good questions to ask. How many books in my genre do you publish annually? You want to go with a press that publishes your type of book more than others, or they at least have experience with your type of book. Obviously a publisher that only does fiction isn't going to be a good publisher if you're writing a nonfiction book. But also thinking about, oh, they've done a lot of cookbooks. I'm writing a cookbook. This could be a good publisher for me. Makes a lot of sense because they have more experience with that type of book, so they can really give you better advice. What distribution channels do you work with? Most publishers that I came across handle the big three distribution channels, which is basically Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and then bookshop.org, which goes to indie bookstores and indie presses. But ask them what distribution channels they focus on. Some may do other channels as well. Some do their own distribution too. So just ask them how the distribution works. And then what happens if I'm unhappy with something? I think that would have been a question I wish I'd asked up front. Just, what's the process? If I don't like the cover designs, what happens? If I'm unhappy with the marketing plan, what does that look like? Or, what are the next steps? And then the last thing I want to talk about is just some lessons that I learned, what I wish I'd known earlier. If I were to go back in time and start this process over, what do I wish that I'd thought about, or what do I wish I'd known earlier? So I wish I'd gotten more clarity about the marketing plan. Like I said, the marketing plan that I chose was an add-on. It cost me about $15,000. And when I looked at the contract, they laid out the marketing plan, the list of things that they would be doing for me. And it was things like calling media, handling the Amazon bestseller campaign. There were sort of two phases to it. But what I was really wanting and thinking, and I didn't necessarily know that I needed to ask for this until I kind of got into the process and realized it wasn't really what I was expecting, is a marketing strategy. I really wanted more of a strategy, like send these emails to these people at this time frame. When your book is launching on October 1st, so we'll reverse engineer the marketing. We'll tell you what to do. What I ended up with was much more of a PR plan than a marketing plan. So a lot of the work didn't really start until the book launched. And it would have just been good for me to know that ahead of time because I didn't really fully wrap my brain around how much it was PR, not marketing. So that's one lesson. I wish I'd gotten a little more clarity around how all of that. I wish I'd had more of a plan for the hard stuff. So I mentioned, ask the question, what do I do if something goes wrong, or what's the process if I'm unhappy with something? And so I got, 6 drafts or 6 designs for my book cover, from their designer, and I didn't like any of them. Not even close to what I wanted for my book cover. And so what did I do? I freaked out. I called my designer. I asked her to design a book cover for me. And I picked one of her designs. I was like, oh, because she listened to me and she gave me designs that I really liked. So I picked one and I said, okay, we're going with this. She was very excited because she's never designed a book cover before. This was going to be her first one. I got all, and I had to pay her, of course, because, this is extra work. She's not involved with the publisher. I had to pay her extra $700. And then, of course, like 2 weeks later, the publisher sends me 6 more designs. And I, of course, like one of their designs better than the one I chose from my designer. So I have to break her heart and tell her I'm not going with her design. I have to, eat crow, go back to the publisher, so, just if I'd calmed down, if I'd just kind of given myself a moment, or if I'd had a plan for what to do in this kind of situation, kind of triaging what could go wrong, how will I respond to it? I wish I'd done that. And then finally, I wish I'd looked more closely at the recent books that Amplify had published, because they published a book that was very similar to mine. I think at the beginning of the year or something like that, a few months before my book came out. And so there were some times where they were comparing my book to that book, which made me really uncomfortable. And, it kind of almost felt like I was this, ugly stepchild or something at certain points. So I wish I kind of looked to see. There was another publisher that I talked to, Page Two, which is another hybrid publisher, and they actually rejected my book because they said, "Oh, we're publishing another book that's very similar to yours, very, around the time your book's coming out, and we don't want them to compete." So that's something that, just I could have thought through, look through the books that have been published by that publisher recently, see if anything looks too similar to yours. It's nice to have, you know, you want your book to kind of stand out and they're even on their roster if that's possible. And that would have been a better result if even if I just had a heads up or known about that, it would have helped me kind of recalibrate my mindset, I guess. So yeah, I think we have time for questions. I'm more than happy to share specific numbers if people are curious about book sales and things like that, or how it's going, getting my return on the investment that I've made. If that's of interest to folks, I'm happy to chat about that. But I think we can open it up to the floor and yeah, take any questions people have. Let me stop sharing my screen.
Thanks, Emily. That was super interesting and helpful.
Good.
And
Yeah.
yeah, so much of what you're sharing is getting into the details. What's it really like when you undergo this process? And as someone who works in books, you also already have an eye for this. So it just goes to show that even if you are in this world, you are still going to come across situations where you don't feel fully prepared, or you don't have an answer, or there's a learning curve, or there's an unexpected expense. So it's really good to normalize this whole
Right.
experience for people. I particularly appreciated, well, many points, but one point where you said if you're wanting to market your book, hybrid is a good thing to do because you can make your money back in the sales you do not from direct book sales, but through speaking engagements where your book's going to be present, or workshops, paid workshops you might give, or other things that are the event is paid and the book is a part of you getting that event, and then it's maybe sold at the event or given away at the event. So versus traditional. So
Mhm.
that's a very helpful distinction. I see that Jennifer has a
Mhm.
question. I'm just going over to the chat. Oh, and it disappeared. Jennifer says, "What is the average cost of hybrid publishing? Average cost."
Yeah, that's a great question. So I don't know the average, but I can tell you the range, um, or give you an approximate range at least. So I think you could probably find a hybrid publisher to help you publish your book for around 25K at the lowest end. And some publishers that I've heard of charge $100,000 and more. So there's a pretty big range. Yeah, so the hybrid publishers that I know of as kind of the top three that were circulating when I was sort of digging in, and there might be others, Joelle, that you know that we could add to the list, but what everyone says is the top dog, the industry standard is called Greenleaf Publishing Group. And they're the ones I've heard charge 100K or even more. And that probably includes marketing. It probably includes some added on services. I don't know what their sort of baseline starting price is, but that was the price that the person I talked to was paying for a business book. Again, she's a speaker and she gets paid to speak. So there's quite a big range. And then there's Amplify. Like I said, they charge around 25-30 to start, at kind of a baseline. There's Page Two is another big hybrid publisher. It was started, I think, by Simon Sinek's COO or something like that. I think I've heard. So that one has been a little bit of a like newer company that's been starting up.
Great, thank you. I'm toggling between the AI transcript and the chat.
Yeah.
Maylee, do you have a question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi. Thanks so much, Emily. That was a big flow of information.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That
No,
was a
no, it's
fire
okay.
hose.
It's great. I was just
Yeah.
scribbling. So, two small things. You mentioned on the distribution, you said three things and I got two of them. I got now where the heck was that page? You said Amazon. Oh, there it is.
Mhm.
Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and what was the third?
Yeah, bookshop.org is one to
Bookshop.org.
definitely know about, especially and if you're doing self-publishing too, you want your book distributed through Bookshop. So that's they distribute to all the indie bookstores in the country. Um, and yeah, so both online and brick and mortar.
Great. And my other question is, I appreciate this. This sounds like kind of a fine balancing or distinction
Yeah.
between when you look at other books that the hybrid publisher has published, it sounds like both other things that are very recent, that are very much in your genre, it is no good. But also, if they don't do your kind of book at all, is not good. So I'm
Yeah.
looking for, like, what do you think is the good balance, the midpoint?
Yeah, sorry. If it's similar to your book, they publish a lot of books similar to yours. That's good. Similar in terms of genre, say,
Okay.
then that's a good thing because that means they've got experience with you, with your type of book, your type of you as an author, the type of author you are likely. But if they publish a book, so my book is about how to write a business book. And so the person, there was another book published also. It was called How to Build a Better Business Book, I think is the name of it. And so that book was, almost exactly the same as my book, right? And another book about how to write business books. And so that's where I say, like, if it's very, very similar to what you're writing, if it's virtually the same or you're giving the same kind of advice as someone else, that's where you want to kind of steer clear. And then it's a recent book, right? If they published a book very similar to yours 10 years ago, that's not really something to worry about. But you don't want to be, you're competing for marketing space with these folks. And I felt like I was competing for their attention. Pay attention to me, put my book out there, not this guy's book. And, he has a big audience. So, I felt like I was competing, bigger audience than I have. Then I felt like I was competing a little bit with him.
Right, totally makes sense. So when you say recent, I mean, when I worked on the proposal with Joelle, she was like, when you do your comps, it should be 3 years or newer. And that was a helpful kind of demarcation. Would you
Yeah.
say the same thing for this issue?
Yeah, I think 3 years is the
Okay.
right number. Yeah. Thank you for
Okay,
that
thanks.
question. That's
Thanks.
great. Yeah.
Emily, I just want to check something with you quickly before we move on. We've got lots of great
Okay.
questions here, but just
Yeah.
when you said the royalties for hybrid can be, did you say 50 to 100%, 50 to 100%?
15.
15. So
15.
as low as 15 versus
Yeah.
traditional, which is about 10 to 15, right?
Yeah, I think I said what did I say? It's in my book and I looked it up earlier. 4 to 15% with traditional.
Four,
That's the number I
that's
found. Yeah,
really
4.
one who's paying 4%.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. Okay, so
Yeah, sure.
let's go to Laura Vita. Hi, Laura. She's asking, how is it going getting a return on your 40K? That's a lot.
Yeah.
And
Great question.
would the cost, I'm assuming this is what you meant, Laura, would the cost be less for memoir or would the return be less for
Mm.
memoir? So two questions from Laura.
Yeah. So again, I don't expect to get my money back through book sales. So I can tell you that these are some of these questions that come up. How many books do you want printed? That was a question at some point that came up, and I have no idea. Tell me how many books I should have printed. That's what I said to them. Tell me what's normal. What do people do? And they said 2,000 books. We're going to put 2,000 printed books in the warehouse. And so I said, great. And so I will say that 400 or so of those books have left the warehouse, and these numbers are a little bit old. So I did a Black Friday promotion, so that those numbers haven't come through yet. But prior to like 2 weeks ago, 400 some books had left the warehouse. 100 of those came to me at my house. So I've been selling books myself through using Venmo. I just, hand copies out and they pay me through Venmo. And then I've been giving a lot of those books away as well. And so, I have about 40 of those books left for me. Amazon has sold around 100-ish copies. Some of those are audio, some of those are Kindle, some of those are print. I sold about 30 print copies. Other sources have sold about 20 print copies. So there's, book sales I've been finding are hard to track, or maybe it's just that they're very lagging behind numbers. But there's something like 150 of my books that have sold. The average across nonfiction, fiction sells around 300 copies. And with business books, it can be a little bit higher because if you're going to go on a speaking tour, you can sell the book and you can say, okay, I'm going to do a workshop. So the company buys 200 books because you're doing a workshop for their, leaders or something like that. So you can sell a little more with business books typically. But I will be surprised. I will be happy if 1,000 of those books have left the warehouse by whenever I need to pay extra for the warehouse fees, which is another consideration. You pay, but the book is laying there. So long-winded answer. What I'm really looking for in terms of getting that 40K back for me is for someone to read my book and say, I want to hire you to ghostwrite my book. So I charge 50K to write a business book for somebody. So if I get one client who's read the book and says, I want to hire you for ghostwriting, the book has paid for itself. That hasn't happened yet, but I will say that I am in conversation with somebody who found me purely because I wrote this book. He's actually a publishing consultant. And he has lined me up with a potential client. He will probably become a very good referral partner for me. So I fully expect that just through this person who found me on LinkedIn because I wrote my book, I expect to make that money back. I'm not even close right now, but I'm only 2 months in as well. It's a long game. If I make money back in 5 years, I will say, okay, I made a good investment.
Emily, can I ask you a clarifying
Yeah.
question for that?
Yeah.
You said that 300 is the average sale for a hybrid published book or any published book?
Any book that's like across the board.
Got it.
Again, fiction, nonfiction. So is that a really helpful statistic? It's not. You want to be comparing apples to apples. And so, when we generalize about these things, it's
Yeah,
not how
that's
many
very big.
business books have sold. It might be a higher average number. I don't know. But
So
that includes anybody who pops a book on Amazon,
I have another
on a
question, but
random Sunday.
I
Yeah.
want to open. Laura, did you get your question answered? And can you clarify a little bit your
Yeah.
question about memoir?
Yeah, the memoir question. Yeah, I didn't get to that.
Oh, let
Yeah,
me
go ahead.
say, when you said 40,000, I was kind of mind blown, like for what
Mhm.
exactly?
Yeah.
Because I talked to hybrid publishers and it's not that much. So I'm like, well, is it
Yeah.
because it's business? Is it different model?
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, 15K of that is for the marketing package, which I added on, so that was extra. But still, yeah, I think they do charge more for a business book. I think that that's true. And maybe it would make sense if it's cost less for memoirs. I don't think my publisher charges less for that different genre, but also yeah, it is true that so I when I started this process, I really wanted to go with Greenleaf because I'd heard that they were the top. I have a friend who's using them and really happy with what they're doing. She's sold 4,000 books. She's coming up on selling 4,000 books, and just her book came out about 18 months ago, August of 2023. But she's, like I said, a speaker, and she goes around speaking a lot, and every audience buys her book. So she's sold a lot that way. But she's also told me, people tell me that the best marketing for my book is giving it away. So to be honest, I don't know that she's sold all 4,000 of those. That's the number she had in the warehouse. Maybe she sold half, but given away 2,000 or something. But that's, to me, like the power of working with a publisher is, do you talk to somebody who's happy with what they have gotten from working with them? And to me, I would be happy if I sold 2,000 books. So hearing her experience made me really want to work with Greenleaf. But like I said, she's paying them $100,000, and I could not afford that. So that's part of the reason I went with Amplify, because they were, less than half the cost. And so, they'd also been recommended to me by a few people. So yeah. Yeah, so I can't answer. I don't know if it's cheaper for memoir. Other people who may have been exploring it might be able to answer that question better than I can. But yeah.
Emily, at what point do you have to pay for warehousing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's a year after they've been there for a year, I have to pay. And I've already paid something. I mean, that was part of the package, to have the books stored for a year. But yeah, that's a big question in my head because I don't, you can always have all the books sent to your house and put them in the garage or something. We don't have a lot of space for that kind of thing. Someone said, well, you just line the walls, which I don't know. Right now they're in the coat closet. So we'll see. But yeah, I think once I see the price tag, I will make a decision about whether I want to keep them there. And also, it's probably climate controlled and things like that, which
Right,
our house
exactly.
is not. So I do
Exactly.
worry about whether they're going to keep.
Okay,
I
so
also
yes.
I also ordered all paperback, and that made it a little bit cheaper. So there were no hardcover copies. This is a funny story. This cover has some embossing. So it's like, indented in there. That costs an extra $1,300 just to have the embossing.
The different
So
printing
yeah.
treatment. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Lauren asks, does the name of the hybrid publisher show up on the book similar to a traditional publisher?
Yes. Yeah. So maybe you can see it's right there, back of the cover, the
Yeah.
back cover.
So it gives it some legitimacy. It has like a publisher brand on it.
Yeah. Yeah. I noticed that too because I kept saying, well, it's a self-published book. And people were like, but you have a publisher, they were saying, oh, you're a publisher, like, oh, you're special. You have a publisher, so that was kind of a nice, thing that I didn't expect, that having a publisher of any kind, because people don't really know the difference between hybrid and traditional outside the business outside the book world. People don't really know the difference. But it gave it a little gravitas that I used a publisher, which was nice.
Definitely makes an impact when you have a publisher, for sure.
Yeah.
Jennifer asked, what about Ingram?
Oh yeah, Ingram Sparks. It's the same as bookshop.org, or they're related. I forget the relationship there, but yes, Ingram Sparks is how you get your book distributed in indie publishers. So maybe it's through Ingram Sparks that it goes to bookshop.org. That might be how it works.
Jennifer, does that answer your question? Great. Thanks, Jennifer. Okay. Did you want to add anything?
Nope.
Okay, you're good. Perfect. Okay, so we answered the question about royalties. And Robert asks, are you using print on demand with Amazon or are they selling the books you printed?
Yeah, Amazon's selling the books I printed. So I did not do the print on demand. I think that was an option at some point. But this is the way they recommended going. So
I have some questions, but anyone else have questions come to mind as you're listening to answers? While you're thinking about what that might be, I'm going to ask my question. So, um, you said you had this interesting point that if you have 25,000 followers or more, then a traditional publisher is better for you than hybrid. And my feeling about it has always been opposite. Other things have been changing. Maybe they're just complementary ideas depending on how you publish. That if you have a lot of followers, you could consider hybrid or self-publishing because you have a built-in market, and then
yeah.
that you're going to have some sales. Depends on how active and engaged your audience is. So I want to just, for me, clarify, I think what you're speaking to, as you did say in your presentation, that 25,000 followers minimum is for really big five publishers who are really looking at bottom line. Although, P.S., by the way, as a tangent, I find it hilarious that they think that anyone lower than a celebrity, anyone lower than God status is going to move volumes and volumes
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
of units. We used to call this mid-market publishing, meaning like people who don't have a lot of followers, before followers were followers, but they have a
Yeah.
great idea or they have a story that needs to be out into the world, which is sort of going away as Big Five gets huge, right? Big Five really feeds on those celebrity books. So
Yeah.
requiring people to have a certain number of followers so that they can showcase and have bestsellers is a little bit of a ruse. But anyway, that's my commentary. You didn't say that. I said that. So,
Yeah.
so were you talking about mostly traditional publishers? I mean, sorry, back up. Big five publishers in that 25K.
Yeah, that's a great question. So having an audience helps you regardless of how you publish your book. So yeah, that is something that every, I think, aspiring author should be thinking about, growing their audience in some way, shape, or some way, shape, or form. Um, I have mixed feelings about being on social media. I have my goal was to get to 10,000 LinkedIn followers. I have almost 11,000 right now. So I did hit that goal in the summer sometime. Um, but then LinkedIn changes their algorithm and only 500 people are seeing my posts every week. So what good does it do me to have 10,000 followers on LinkedIn when 500 of them are seeing my posts? I thought, oh, if I have 10,000 followers on LinkedIn and I start sharing my posts and they get to 5,000 of my audience numbers, then I will sell a lot of books. But then, the algorithms change, and this is where we're at. But the 25K mark is a number I've heard about trying to go to the big five. Absolutely right, Joelle. Because, and everyone talks about this. If you think the traditional publisher, you get a traditional publisher and they're going to take care of the marketing and you're going to sell thousands and thousands of books just because that's the publisher has picked you up. That is not what's going to happen. And I've talked to a lot of people recently who've gone with traditional publishers, not necessarily big five, but middle tier kind of publishers, and been really disappointed because they only ended up selling 300 books and they had 5,000 in the warehouse or something like that. So, it really selling that book, the marketing is all on you. That's the biggest thing I've learned, the biggest takeaway. Not that I hadn't heard that many times before, but it just kind of going through it myself, I've really felt how that's the case. Like I didn't even get a strategy out of my publisher, and all I was left like, oh, I guess I better email some people about this book. I guess I better have a launch team together. Um, so yeah, it is true. The more following you've built before the book comes out, the better chance you have of hitting the ground running. Because I always think, I've been, kind of disappointed in the number of sales I've had because I was really hoping to sell about 1,000 books. I'm happy if I sell 50% of what they printed for me. So selling 150 by this point, I think, how am I going to have a better month than my launch month? So now I've kind of recalibrated those numbers in my head because I don't know that I'll sell 1,000 books. Again, maybe over 5 years. If I start doing more speaking, if I start doing, I want to do a book club, maybe I do a book club every 6 months, something like that. But yeah, no, you're selling these books like one or two or three at a time, not 50 or 100 for the most part, and that's just something to keep in mind. But yeah, having that audience ready for the book, and whatever you can do to prime them ahead of the book is another thing that I like to talk about because we think, oh, okay, when the book's finished, then I'll worry about marketing. But I want you to be thinking about marketing that book even while you're writing it. Just talking about how you're writing a book is good marketing and can get people ready.
And for those of you whose heart is in your shoes right now, thinking, well, what have I been doing then all this time? I just want to
Yeah.
reassure you that you don't have to publish with the big five. There are indie publishers and small publishers, and they are still doing quality work, sometimes better quality work than the big five. And self and hybrid are options. Obviously, money is involved. So don't despair, but it's good to know what's happening out there and what the expectations are. However wonky those expectations are, it's just good to know. And then, of course, there's always the outlier situation, although don't rely on the outlier situation, but those do happen where
Yeah.
despite having low following or no public presence, you do manage to get a great deal with a publisher. So things can happen. But one thing is true, no matter how much help you get in marketing from none to some, you will probably end up doing way more than you think you need to.
Can I ask a
Yes.
question?
Yes.
Um, Sorry, my Zoom actually like shut off in the middle of your presentation, so you may have
Oh,
answered
no,
this. And there was some
no.
confusion about the royalties. is your hybrid publisher taking royalties after you've spent $40,000 on, like, can you explain that
Yep.
business part of the
Yeah.
yes?
Yeah, I get 70% of my royalties. I think Amazon itself gives you 70% too. So if you just do self-publishing, Kindle Direct Publishing, that's how, by the way, they make money. Even though it's free to upload your book, they take some of the royalties. Yeah, so my publisher is getting 30% of the royalties for my book.
Okay.
Mhm.
And so the 15 to 100% is correct in terms of hybrid. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah,
for
that's a number I've seen.
okay.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and again, you know, to, they're not getting many royalties because, again, I'm going to probably be giving away a good chunk of these books. So it's not as if they're getting rich off the royalties either. Like they're not nobody's making money on book sales, unfortunately. That's why these hybrid publishers charge for the other services. It makes sense. But yeah.
Yes, and one thing that we talked about, Emily, on your book summit when you were launching your book is should you do a proposal for a
Yeah.
hybrid book or a self-publishing book, self-published book? You definitely have to have
Mhm.
one for traditional, as those of you who have done or in BPA know, Book Proposal Academy, my program, you know that. But more and more, I've been um, talking to people who regret not having a proposal going into hybrid or self-publishing because as we're talking about there's a whole world of publishing out there that
Yeah.
you don't think about at first. it's it's just something that most of us, not everybody, don't think about. Like, well, what world does my book exist in? What world do I want my book to exist in? And how do I want my book to exist in the world? Like that kind of high level thinking, or maybe even strategy thinking, not even marketing, just like context. We don't tend to do unless we have to, which for traditional we have
Right.
to. But I think that these days it makes a lot of sense to do a proposal for self and hybrid, even though it's an investment of time and it's an investment of money. It's a learning curve. Again, as all of you who've gone through BPA know, all of those things, because it puts you so much more in the driver's seat and you will understand a lot more about, well, if I am going to market my book, who am I going to market
Mhm.
it to and how might I do
Mhm.
that? And it gives you at least some parameters for that. So you've got a picture of what you're working with before you go out there. And I might not have said
Yeah.
this 5, 7 years ago, but now I think it's important.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good point, Joelle, because when you and I were having our interview for the summit that I did for my book launch, that you really drove that point home, and I really like it because I'm working with a client right now, a developmental editing client, and she's trying to go the traditional route. And it's a book about gathering and change in the workplace. And so she's queried some agents and maybe 20 or something so far, maybe fewer than that, maybe like 10. But she's getting amazing feedback that she wouldn't get if she'd said, "Oh, I'm not going to write a proposal because I'm probably just going to go hybrid." She's getting amazing feedback based on her proposal, and we're going to have to change this book based on that feedback. But it's a good thing because what they're doing is broadening the idea so that it doesn't just apply to CEOs and businesses, but it applies. They want books that apply in a wider way, without like getting watered down, right? It has to be this idea that people can really latch onto. And that it was just really interesting. Both of us were like, it's bad news that these agents are turning you down, but it's really good feedback that you're getting. And you can probably go back to them with a new proposal once we rewrite it. And, I think I have a really good feeling that she's going to get picked up by somebody. But yeah, having a proposal, it just makes marketing the book so much easier. You don't even know what's in your book until you step back and think like, what are my readers getting from this? And that's what a
Exactly.
proposal asks you to do. And then
Exactly.
the marketing is like so much easier once you have those answers to those questions.
Exactly. I love that rejection that feels like an acceptance. I
Yeah.
really work with that concept because you can get a real buzz from someone just responding to you, and that can give you a lot more energy to go forward
Yes.
from there. So,
Yes.
congratulations to your
Yes.
client. That's really exciting.
Yes. Oh, and nobody said her audience is too small. But that was the other thing that she and I discussed as being, good news. Nobody said, "Oh, you don't have enough of an audience."
And how big is her audience at the moment?
Yeah, I don't even know. I think she has like 3,000 followers
Okay.
on LinkedIn. Like she
Yeah,
hasn't thought
see?
about building her audience at all.
Great.
So yeah.
Awesome. Great. Awesome point. I love it.
Yeah.
Maylee, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, thanks. So I was just at the American Academy of Religion conference
Uh-huh.
and
Uh-huh.
went through the book hall. And Joelle wanted you to know I pitched like every opportunity I could. It was
Yes.
such good experience.
Love it.
It was so interesting to then think, okay, what did I forget to say? How did it go down? What was the response? Whose eyes lit up? Who asked questions, follow up, and who for whom it was like silence. So that was really good. Thank you, Joelle, for your encouragement on that front. The question I want to bring in is I spoke with two, I would say, smaller publishers who have been in my top 5. And both of them said regarding agents, they said, yes, we work with agents, but you can also come directly to us. And they both said agents are often reluctant or not so interested in approaching us because what we offer as a deal, as a book deal, is smaller than bigger publishers. So I wanted to ask about that. Thanks.
Yeah. That's a great question.
Do you want me to take it or do you want to respond, Emily?
Yeah, no. I'd love to hear what you think, Joelle. Yeah.
Yeah, so an agent works on commission. And if they are licensed through the American Agency of Agents, that's not what it's called, but something like that, they are only allowed to make money outside of their agenting fee for very specific things. Like it just got broadened a few years ago. So they can do some developmental work and charge for it sometimes, but most of their income comes from their commission, which is 15% usually, unless it's foreign rights, it'll be a little bit more. And they do not make a lot of money if your book deal is really small. So if they're passionate about your project and they don't mind doing the work for basically no pay, they're really like, I want to champion this. It's super niche. It's not gonna find a home in any big press because it's too specific, but it's so great. I'm willing to go to bat for this. They're almost doing it for free. Or maybe they're building their list and they can see a bigger title down the road coming, or they think it's tiny, but it could blow up. Like they might have all kinds of reasons to do it. But at the bottom line, if we're talking about bread and butter, there's no money in it for them. And they often agents don't get paid that much and they're working hard. So that could be just a really practical reason why they wouldn't take it. There's no reason why you couldn't approach the publisher yourself. That's a totally respectable thing to do. You just want to have someone by your side who can help you negotiate the deal, who can step in if there are issues, who can guide you in the conversation with the publisher to make sure the terms are favorable to you and that if there are problems, you can negotiate that. So that could be a publishing lawyer or an entertainment lawyer or someone who deals with intellectual property, perhaps. You want to have someone with experience negotiating publishing contracts or entertainment contracts in particular. So you can go into those conversations knowledgeably, or on a shoestring, you could join the authors guild, but you have to have a certain amount of publications under your belt to do that. And they have a lawyer that you can tap into. There's a waiting list for the lawyer. So there's some requirements before you can use that service. But that's another option. Does that answer your question, Mealy?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Joelle. Emily, anything to add from your experience?
No, I'll just say that, yeah, the point about your book being very specific is a good one. Like if your book is more specific than whatever, if it's very niche, I would say then you might be able to, you may have a better result approaching publishers directly. Like I have a friend who writes academic philosophy books, and she goes directly to the publisher. She doesn't have an agent. So yeah, that's a good point. Some publishers you can go directly to. Yeah.
We are right at the top of the hour, and there's one more question from Rachel. Rachel, you direct messaged me. Do you mind if I read out your question out loud?
Don't mind at all,
Oh,
however you paraphrase it. And hello, everyone.
okay, hello. So it is top of the hour. If you have to leave, oops, that is not what I want to put there. Hold on. I want to put the link to Emily's free download into the chat, and I almost put a block of text from a client in there instead. So let me just get the right link in there so you won't read about sex. You're gonna actually get the link to Emily's freebie. Okay. So if you have to leave because we're at the top of the hour, thank you so much for coming. Thank you so, so much. The freebie is how to mine the content of your existing work to find an idea that might work for a book. So that's in the chat now. You can download it for free. It's from Emily. You will also get the replay as soon as it finishes processing. I'll send that out in an email later today. If you don't see it, definitely check your spam folder for that. And you'll have till December 15th to watch. If you have time, I'm going to read out Rachel's question and we're going to talk about it for the last few minutes here. So Rachel asks, any specific thoughts on pitching proposals for what is basically a coffee table book that will be A, self-published, B, marketed more like a product versus something for a bookstore, including book layout, design, sample chapter, look and feel, target outlets I've not thought about. That's one question. And the other question is, if no one really makes money on their books, what is the range of goals, purposes that makes it strategic or worthwhile to get this book out into the world? Okay, so first question, any thoughts on pitching a coffee table book that will be self-published? Or doing a proposal. Is that what you mean, Rachel? Doing a proposal for a book that would be
Specifically,
self-published?
yeah, I mean, I understand the value of writing the proposal as if you are sending it to publishers, because it does half clarify that you've written a brief for yourself and you've thought about the who, where, when, why, what kind of things. My question, I guess, was specifically, do I include what designers of books call blads, which are like a sample chapter to show visual look and feel? And I mean, I'm doing that for myself while designing the thing. That's a big part of the essence of the project. But I'm wondering, like, do I need that should I include that in a proposal, or should I actually withhold that in a proposal if I am sharing it with people who are not publishers that I want to attract, but touch points that I want to reach when I'm distributing this? I know that I'm going to go through Ingram in some angles, but in others, I'm literally walking into specific places and saying, you need this piece of content to market your product. Here's the content. So they need to see what it looks like, as well as having the kind of pitch story.
Emily, do you have thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think it's a great thing to include. I think that any question they might have about the book, if you could answer it, I think in a brief then or proposal, then I think that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Right. And then the second one is just to validate, because I'm in that bit of the creativity curve where I'm like, oh my God, what is this mess? And why am I doing it? But I'm too far in and I've told everyone about it. So it's really like, what are the range of other outcomes where there's value of a different kind besides cold hard cash to pay yourself back for all the publishing costs you've just come up with? Where does it lead for people if they sold 500 books, but they sold 5 of them to really important, worthwhile people? What kinds of conversations did it ignite? So I kind of need to hold on to that tiny point of light on the far distant horizon
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, how do I justify to someone writing a book of poetry, that's art, a book. So many people look at their books as art rather than, to make money for a business. People are like running their HR consulting company, but writing children's books. And I have a friend who's written a children's book and she really wants to get it published, but she doesn't want to self-publish it. And she's gone to every publisher she can think of. So there are some markets that are tougher than others, but I think that there's a lot of satisfaction in having the book out in some way, shape, or form. You can do print on demand. And I think with print on demand, you only pay when someone has bought the book and it's you're printing it and for them. So that can be a good option in terms of you can do it on a shoestring budget. But just to have your art out there in the world. And you're absolutely right. Who knows who's going to stumble across this thing that could lead to an opportunity for something else down the road. And that's why, it's very hard to measure the ROI. And that's why I think like there's an recent report out on the ROI of business books. It's easier to measure the ROI of a business book. Again, if I get a client that read my book, that counts, that
Right.
yeah, it works. But yeah, I think if your goal is not to make back all the money, you have to figure out what it is, what the value of having it out in the world is for you. And it might just be like this is creative expression. I just want to put it out there. And then great, just do it on a shoestring so that you're not going into debt for your creative expression. That's all.
That's a really great
yeah.
point.
If you're an artist, you're used to doing that. I mean, I think that's a really insightful comment to think of it. If it's a piece of art that sets you in a different headspace than like, I'm going to be like someone
Right.
the whole of Barnes and
Right.
Noble out.
Yeah.
Then I also think that it falls into like the naked commerce that makes people who write worthwhile books also kind of come to the fore. And actually pairing the art with the commerce is like probably where my project is going, because I'm not worried about being on a New York Times bestseller list, but I am interested in it going to the people who care about the subject matter. So
yeah,
more like it's becoming a branding project when I think about what
exactly. Yeah, I like that. And I will say, if that's where you're going, do not go hybrid. You do not want to, pay somebody to. My dad wrote a children's book and he queried a bunch of agents, and I feel so bad for him because I just don't have the expertise to really help him. But I would never recommend that he pay to have his book printed, like just put a PDF up you can put something on Amazon if you want, but again, that's free and it's out there for people to get, but print on demand, great. But don't go paying a company because you think they're going to help you sell your books, because they're not.
No, I have enough experience of other people producing books who are really, really disappointed to find that the publishers are like, so where's your list of people that you want to promote this to and your plan? And it turns out that if that's the reason you think a publisher is going to help you, then just do it yourself.
Right.
Because all the other tools are there.
You know what I just wanted to say, what was coming to me, Rachel, is like we all wish, all of us publishing really special books or really beautiful books or amazing story books, but we don't have whatever the formula that publishing is looking for. But especially art projects like yours, we all want to be Steve McQueen. Like we all want that break that he got. Amazing. He just had whatever his stars are that were aligned, just such a great, and I'm glad for it because I enjoy his art. But you can still be that crazy flower that pushes up through the sidewalk and people walk by and go, wow, what is that? That's amazing. How did that happen? You can still be that if there's a whole range of personal ROI, and you don't even know with books especially, you don't really know how it's going to affect people or who it's going to meet or cross paths with, that it's going to affect their lives. And so there is that unquantifiable, non-commercial value that you can't even really estimate at this moment in time. But in sort of the field, you put this thing into the field with the full crazy trust that someone is going to really appreciate it. I mean, that is art, right? That is like the radical trust of like, this is going to land even if I'm losing my mind putting it together.
Yeah, that's good. That's a great summary of where my head is at right now. There has been a lot of radical trust and losing my mind. Robert, I'll let you.
Well, am putting out a similar book as kind of an art book, tabletop book, and I've been working on it for a long time. Anyway, the the purpose for me is to like help build a platform, and what I found by going through it is there it's slowly building. A lot of people are showing up to help me in different ways, and it's the book is photographs with this kind of narrative writing, which is sort of poetic, or and I was offered a photo show here locally in a gallery
Nice.
to
Yeah.
release it. So, and that's going to just
There you
raise
go.
my profile. So there's
Yeah,
reasons to do this.
for sure.
I think if I sell 100, I'll be extremely happy.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so there's a reason to do it. And you know, yeah, I think you should go for it. And one other thing, there's other along in this publishing world, there are companies that will sell a la carte services. So you can really pick like, oh, I want this social media, I want help with this social media, or I want help with this kind of marketing, or I want help um, entering my book into contests or something like that. And you can pick those things and then pay for what you want. So
Yes.
that's off. I don't have a specific name for you right now, but
I can look up a la carte
yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
publishing.
Joelle does. She knows she when because I did the Book Proposal Academy, and there was a woman in there who offers those kind of services. And do you remember who that was, Joelle?
I'm totally drawing a blank. And I think, Deb, you might have asked me this question too. I'm totally drawing a blank of who it is. Someone who offers a la carte marketing services?
Yeah, and she had like a do it yourself thing. She had a whole package.
Yeah.
She'll also work with regular publishers and help put the marketing together. But she'll also sell, like she called it a DIY or DY or whatever.
Do you have
So
yeah.
yeah,
It's not
yeah.
Jenny Lisk, right? Not Jenny Lisk. Is that her? No.
I'm going to look
Does
it up in my notes because I'm going to reach out to her actually.
Okay.
So I'm beginning to think that that's the right avenue for something like this. These
If
kind
you
of art
find
books.
her, send the name to Joelle, and then Joelle, I'd love to hear.
Yes, I'll send it to you.
I've been
Okay.
joining these
Yeah.
kinds of conversations for a few months in that kind of long lead time of more prep than action. And so it's great to know. I've that's sort of triangulating with some of the kind of insight I've got from other conversations about that. That's really helpful. But yeah, that's really validating to hear that I'm thinking of it as a platform too, where I'm like, do you know what? If I end up broadcasting about this thing and it turns out that I get radio work or a podcast opportunity that leads me to other kinds of client work from doing this thing, it's like the book has such centrality, but actually it takes the heat off it a bit to think of it as a means to other ends. And I'm trying to work out what I'm positioning it for.
Yeah.
Because
And that might take some time to figure that out.
yeah.
There's also printers now, printers that do really, really high quality work, and they can do low runs. It's not like it used to be where you had to print 1,000 books or something. And the one I'm looking at right now, you can do 50 or 100 books. You can do hard copies, hardback, or you can do paper. So there's a lot of options, and it's so much cheaper. You can't even believe it. It's becoming possible to do this now.
It's really good now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that's a whole other conversation, Joelle. We could do on the other side of this.
Yes. Well, I was just gonna say, Robert and Rachel, you're both on the West Coast at the moment. Sounds like you have things to talk about.
Yes. Please put us in touch. I'd happily talk to you. I've got some printer names. I'm quite far along in the changing hats from author to designer to publisher. So
Robert, is it okay if I connect you?
Yes, please do.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
Thank you. All right,
Great.
thanks for that input. That's the stimulation, that's the acceptance as energy right there to hear that.
Great, no problem. Well, I think we're at the end of our questions. Thanks for staying a little longer, those of you who did, and those of you who watched all the way to the end, congratulations. And I want to say thanks to everyone here. Thank you so much, Emily. Super helpful, very interesting. Congratulations on your book. I hope you sell many more copies and get lots of clients And
Here.
your ROI comes to fulfillment also. That's what we want out of this. You've given us a lot to think about, which is really helpful having this context. And as we do in BPA, let's all come off mute and say so long for now.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks,
have a good
everybody.
week.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Till next
you.
time.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.